Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining this webinar. I think today is going to be so exciting and interesting because we're going to learn, and hopefully you're going to learn a lot about overcoming the fears of how to be more accessible for disabled people in sport. And we've got three incredible Paralympians with us today to share their knowledge. So would you like to introduce yourselves? Maybe Grace, you start.
Yeah, hello everybody. My name's Grace Harvey and I'm a Paralympic swimmer. So I competed at the Tokyo and the Paris Games and I became Paralympic champion for the first time in Paris. Thank you. I've been involved in para swimming since 2009 and I've been an athlete, I've been a coach, I've been a volunteer and I've been an official. And I'm just really excited to be on this call today with you all.
And Krysten?
So Krysten Coombs, para badminton athlete with achondroplasia, two-time Paralympian, medaled in Tokyo with a bronze and then upgraded to a silver in Paris. And yeah, just really passionate about disability sport and inclusion. And yeah, got a big role with the Wolf Sports Association as well, sit on the board there and yeah, help them out a lot. But yeah, looking forward to answering some questions today and hopefully this will go well.
And Mike?
Hi, yeah, I'm a old Paralympian, if you like, back from 1992 in Barcelona, so completely different time. But I think I'm here more today because of my work involved in disability sport in North Wales and developing a wheelchair sports sort of culture that we wanted to get everyone a sort of local participation opportunity, and that seems to be going quite well. So yeah, I'm more here for that club and inclusion type model, I think.
Amazing. And I'm Millie Pickles. I'm your host today, everybody. And I'm definitely not a Paralympian, not that skilled, but I am an amputee who lost my leg 7 years ago and wanted to go on the journey of becoming a Paralympian, but I had a lot of barriers that I faced and struggled to get into the sport. So I'm really excited to hear about all of our different perspectives today. And I think we've had so many questions from loads of you, so we'll try and get through them all. But there are essentially four main key themes that we're going to go along. So we've got the personal journey of the Paralympians, and then about encouraging participation within sport, overcoming barriers, and then the practical solutions for organizations. So, Krysten, let's go with you first. When you became a Paralympian, what was the journey like, and what barriers did you find that you faced?
Yeah, so for me, sort of parasport was a bit later. It wasn't until about 15, 16 that I got involved. But found barriers obviously not in parasport. Played football and things like that, which I found really tough. Obviously, I got to a height where I wouldn't, get any taller and things, and my friends all got taller. So then it was that sort of moment where I sort of looked at parasports, found para table tennis, and then eventually got into the para badminton. But I think I was fortunate enough that when I got into the para badminton, it was pretty good, and we sort of had a great sort of setup then, and I haven't really found many barriers with that. So sort of parasport wise, I haven't. Parasport, but in the sort of school time, I definitely found a lot of barriers of not being included in things, or where I lived, there wasn't a para club of any sort. Yeah.
Yeah. And what about you, Grace?
Yeah, so when I was growing up, I didn't really know that parasport existed. So I was born with my disability. I've got cerebral palsy, and my sport's always been swimming, but I thought it was just something that you did once a week because your parents didn't want you to drown. So I guess my main barrier was not knowing that there was parasport. So my introduction came watching the 2008 games, and that was the first time I'd ever seen anybody with an impairment competing in sport. And I was like, wow, like this is something that I can do. I didn't know that was an option to me. So when I joined my local swimming club, I was also the only person there with a disability. But my coach was fantastic. She just took it in her stride. So I don't have a leg kick or anything. And she right off the bat was like, right, we'll just do more pool. We're going to put you in a lane with people of a similar age to make sure you're feeling included rather than always being singled out for the things that I couldn't do. I guess what I really struggled with was at times feeling accepted because there'd be my peers going off to competitions that I was never going to qualify for based on the times that people in age groups had to hit. So I could find that like really frustrating at times. But I would say, it was kind of being into that para sport world of actually going to be classified, where I was the first time I'd actually been in a pool with other people with a disability, that I started to find acceptance. So when I heard about like the Paralympic movement and being involved with it, like immediately I was like, this is something that I feel I need to be a part of. And it's such a special and beautiful world to be a part of. And sometimes when I look back, I think the major barrier I had for me and my own self-esteem was just not knowing that it existed.
Do you think having a coach that empowered you was really helpful?
Oh, so empowering. You know, it's like a core memory for me. It was like a Tuesday at 6:10 when I met my first coach, Janet, and I said to her, I want to go to Paralympic Games. And without missing a beat, she was like, yeah, we're going to do this. You know, like she just saw me as another athlete. She would always go to like the para inclusive meets with me. She would work with me on what my limitations were. You know, I wouldn't be able to kick or dive. And she was like, right, okay, what other things can we train? And I came from an environment where my swimming teacher didn't bother to teach me breaststroke and butterfly because she was like, well, you know, you don't have a leg kick, you're not going to be able to do it. Whereas Janet was like, okay, we're going to do it in a way that you can do it. Just because you can't do the leg doesn't mean that you can't do the arms. And everyone else in the club was following a medley pathway for training. And she's like, we're going to do the exact same. It doesn't matter if we're doing it differently, we're doing it your way. And her actually standing up and being like, we're going to make this work was career altering for me. I would not be an athlete if it were not for her.
That is so amazing to hear how wonderful she is. And I would like to think that a lot of people do have that approach. I think with my running as well, I had a running coach for 2 years because I wanted to do 100-meter sprints. And I'm not sure that it was necessarily the right support for me because she essentially said that I've just got to run like I'm able-bodied. And I found that quite challenging. And I don't know, I do think if I had the right support back then, would I have actually gone to the Paralympics? I don't know. And I think for me, a massive barrier was not having a clue where to go to sign up to do anything. I remember I was reaching out to people, Paralympians online, like, how do I get into this? And now I know about the Paralympic Potential Day, which is amazing. But obviously I didn't know about that back then. But Mike, I'd love to know if you've got any tips for young players and trying to get them into the clubs or to have more support.
I think it's obviously there's an area where you're from. You know, there's a lot of where I'm from in North Wales. Obviously, there's quite a lot of gaps in terms of facilitating that. If you're living in a more populated area, then there's going to be more opportunities probably and more different sort of areas to go into. But from our point of view, what we try and do is make sure that it's a really targeted approach. So if someone comes on the radar that is interested in getting involved and wants to know more, and there's as much work goes in before they even come through the door as there is once they arrive. Obviously, we've found over time that the hardest thing is coming through the door at times, you know, whether that's to a swimming pool or a sports hall or a track or whatever. You know, and if we can do the work before they even get there in terms of reassuring, making sure they understand there's a group of people there that they can learn from, there's coaches that understand, there's facilities, there's accessible facilities, there's equipment, you know, all of those barriers are removed so that the only thing they need to worry about, like any person going to a sports club, is let me have a go, let me do this, you know, and then obviously steps go from there. So yeah, we find that, you know, in terms of getting that work done before they even turn up is probably as important as what they do when they arrive.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. But how do you target individuals to know to come along?
I mean, that's the golden question, isn't it? You know, in para sport especially, you can go along to any football club and see a mini section, and there's hundreds of kids running around the football field from age 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and there's 20 in every age group, and it's massive numbers. With us in terms of disability sport, I feel you can do, if you get 2 people coming through every couple of months, then that's amazing. You know, you can do an awful lot of work with 2 young potential Paralympic athletes or whatever. So yeah, we find that there's an awful lot of work to be done in terms of targeting the pathways that they'll come along through. We've done a lot of work with occupational therapy students. So we've done sessions with them because we knew that in time they would become the practitioners that see people and speak to people. And if they've experienced what we can offer, they will become your advocates and they will find the people for you. And then one referral from a person like that means the world, you know, and then that person will believe that there's an opportunity there for them to go. So that might be therapists, it might be physios, it might be local school resources, it can be other sports clubs that maybe are on the path to becoming inclusive, but they're maybe not ready for someone with a certain type of disability. So having those relationships means someone comes through the door that they can't help at the moment, they can refer them to us and we can help them along that pathway. So yeah, there's lots of diverse and sort of varied ways of doing it, but for me, it's that targeted approach of the one or two people, as opposed to find the thousands.
Yeah, that's so good to hear. And Krysten, Grace, what do you think? Has social media helped, people get in touch with you and say they want to get into sports as well, or any other ways?
Yeah, I think especially for me, like, being a 34-year-old now, is I think when I started, there wasn't social media and there wasn't as many of these Paralympic talent days like you mentioned about. And I think a big thing I hear often now is, like Grace actually mentioned it, a lot of people don't always know there is a category for them, or there is somewhere where they can fit in. And I think it's being able to build that awareness in your local area or something, and doing your own sort of days where people can come along. And and obviously social media now is probably the greatest thing for that.
Yeah. And then Grace, there's definitely a difference in participation with females. So do you think there's a good way to get specifically females on board?
I think the major thing is having really strong, positive female role models, because how can we expect our young athletes to be something they can't see? Because it is really, really difficult, especially when you're a young teenage girl, you're going through so much at school and everything, your body's changing, you lack that confidence, but sport gives you so much confidence. And I don't think it's more of an issue of how do we get more girls, and it's how do we keep girls in sport as well, because I remember when I was at school, so I went to an all-girls school, and the amount of like friends that would give up their dancing or playing hockey when they hit a certain age because they weren't comfortable, being around other people in kit was a really big issue. And I think, we need to reiterate the message for not just for girls, but for everybody. Like, it doesn't matter what your body type is. Everybody has insecurities. You don't have to be the best if you're doing sport. You just have to participate, because at the end of the day, it's not always about being physically active. It's amazing to be physically active, but it also gives you that time away from the normal humdrum of life. It gives you those social connections to be around other people, and also to be valued within that sporting community as well, and actually to be able to share experiences of, oh, this is my first time, for example, trying boccia, like, this is so cool, I didn't know this was an option to me. And there's always going to be a sport that everyone can do. And girls may find that they might start with a sport and transition into somewhere else. Like, I've got so many like girlfriends now who are taking up running because they're seeing so many other like girls running or going to run clubs on social media and everything. And I love that the positivity that's fostering. I think if we're gonna really encourage more girls to get into sport, we need to show them these positive role models, even just a friend next door who's just started a new club, because you can start sport at any age. You don't have to try and be the best. It's just finding that outlet where you feel valued, where you can do something physical, something social, and also have that emotional connection with others.
I think that's such a brilliant answer, and I could not agree more. And I related to it there as well with me, because I've always been a really sporty person. And then when I lost my leg and my life completely changed, I didn't know how to exercise anymore. I was lost with what to do. I felt really lonely. I gained loads of weight. And there's a stat actually that says about double the amount of disabled people feel more lonely than able-bodied people, and that's around 50% of individuals. So having those role models that you can look up to, or if there's female-only sessions where women can go and feel more confident because they just know it's only going to be females, and would help massively. And Mike, I'd love to know your thoughts on this as well.
Well, this is an area that we've within the wheelchair basketball area in North Wales. This is something that we've always used, always been very positive about, and almost a priority for what we've done. We've been a bit lucky in terms of sometimes you just need those people to come through the door at some point, and if you get the right blend and mix, then it starts to build momentum. And also, they agree completely with Grace. It's the environment and the visuals and the role models. We're very deliberate in terms of our junior and sort of children's sessions and stuff. we really encourage parents to get involved in that and help as volunteers and become coaches and sort of facilitate things. And, you know, mums and dads and just offering that sort of softer approach to a session. So it's not just the head coach that comes in and teaches you how to do sport or whatever. There's these softer approach and that more sort of welcoming environment. And also the visual thing of seeing yourself in someone else. We have a young girl who came to us when she was 5 or 6 years old, double below knee amputee. And it just so happens that from the very first night that we started our club 15 years ago, one of our new members that became a coach was also a female below knee double amputee. And so for this young girl to come in and see her coach, exactly the same situation as her, straight away, it was sold. You know, the deal was done. I mean, that's very rare. You know, that's not always going to happen, but that's the type of deliberate sort of stuff that we try and do. Of even if we're sending flyers out to certain people who've requested, to know more, we'll try and find out what that person's situation is, and we'll make the flyer reflect what they need to see, so they can see there's other people in the group that they recognize in themselves, sort of thing. So yeah, I think there's an awful lot of the softer edges of stuff that you need to look at, as opposed to, you know, just saying we want more women and girls. You know, it's a very much a more subtle approach than that.
Yeah, I definitely think with me going to the Paralympics Potential Day recently, I really felt everything that you're saying. And I could see amongst other disabled people, just having somebody that looks like them, they can connect with. It was so powerful. And even the parents were saying, you know, thank you so much for this day, because it means so much for them as well. And I definitely think the softer approach is amazing. We've also got some questions coming through, so a little interlude. So from Kate Cole, she says, what steps can we take to ensure we're creating a welcoming environment for disabled participants, and how can we implement these effectively? Who would like to answer that one first?
Well, I think we've sort of touched on it with that last question a little bit, in terms of the audience, you know, knowing your audience and understanding what you're trying to achieve and who you're trying to attract, and making that, if you can, making that environment reflective of that. And it almost like takes away that fear and that barrier of like, I'm not, if you're a young woman or young girl going into an environment that's full of older men, that's not going to be a great environment. But, you know, it might be initially a bit fearful. But if you've got an environment where there's people of similar age, similar style, similar standards, similar disabilities, you know, that's that sort of welcoming, softer approach. So I think it's just about knowing your audience and trying to make things fit and have the right look, really.
We've got another question, which is quite similar, but I think it'd be great if we could add more advice. But essentially, what advice would you give to somebody who wants to set up a para sports club, as they're trying to set up para ice hockey club in London, as there currently isn't one? So any tips outside of providing a welcoming, comforting support that you think would be really helpful? Krysten, have you got any ideas?
I think it's reaching out, really, and just, you know, making it as welcoming and as, you know, well, inclusive as you can. Obviously, we want parasport to be inclusive, but then you need to make the parasport even more inclusive because of the different disabilities. And I think it's just making sure that everyone is welcome to start it, because you've got to start somewhere where, you know, that anyone can come along. Otherwise, you won't get anyone, because who knows, one person might come, that might get another 4 people. So yeah, I think for me, that's sort of just that sort of area.
Yeah, I think as well, when creating a club that's for disabled people, is asking disabled people what they want from that club, to ensure that it's actually an environment that they want to come into. Because I think so often people just assume what disabled people want rather than just directly asking. And I think there's a lot of fear sometimes in doing the wrong thing or not doing the right thing, essentially. And for me, I just think if somebody's asking me and they're trying, even if they do something wrong, I value the fact that they're trying to do something and set something up. So just always asking disabled people what they want is so key.
I definitely agree with what you're saying there, Millie, as well. And also asking those with a disability, you know, what are your limitations? Because it's so easy to assume that everyone who has the same disability has the same type of ability. And also, I think another key thing was when you're enjoying the session is you effectively forget about the fact that you have a disability because you're just doing the sport. And when you're in an environment where everyone has a disability, like I'm sure Krysten, you experienced it too at the Paralympic Games, we're in a dining hall where 98% of the people in the room have a disability. It seems obsolete, you know, and you're just there to enjoy the activity, and it's not made a big thing. You're not made to feel like you're disabled, that you have a disability. You're just there because you want to enjoy the activity. And I think if you're a practitioner that's leading an integrated session, don't always draw attention to the fact that you have mixed abilities within the group, you know, because everyone's going to find a way to adapt, and it's more about enjoying cycling or enjoying rowing or just cracking on with the activity to everyone's best of their ability. Because even if you forget about the fact that some people in the group do have a disability, people's skill levels are always going to be different, regardless of the fact if they have an impairment or they don't. We can't always expect everyone to be amazing at something, because everyone has to start from that grassroots level of learning how to participate in the sport.
Yeah, definitely treating everybody as individuals rather than just a collective.
Yeah.
Nice.
I think there's also, from a practical point of view, I know when we started, it was about doing that, making sure there's a need first. You know, obviously, if there's a need, and I'm sure there is in London, and if there isn't a club existing, I'm sure the numbers will be great. But I know with us, we almost had to go out on a bit of a risk in terms of we thought we were pretty sure there was a need, and the work we'd done behind the scenes sort of indicated that. But until you do it, you don't really know. And then it's a bit of an older reference here, but the field of dreams thing of, you build it and they'll come. And I think it's the balance between those two thoughts of, one, make sure there is a need. And then if you're pretty sure there is, then go with it and keep with it. And you may not get that initial, everything perfect initially, but over time, people will come if you're offering that good product and that good environment. So yeah, keep it going and build it and they'll come.
I'd also reach out to disabled content creators, because I know myself and then other people within the same industry as me would 100% come along and would love to give it a go and try and raise awareness around it, because we want disabled people to get involved in sports and we want to spread that awareness. So I will absolutely come to your club when if you reach out and let me know, because I just think it's so important to just get the awareness there, and there are loads of people out there ready to do that. We've also got another question from someone called Charlie Appley, and I was wondering if maybe Charlie would want to come and ask the question live instead of me reading it out. I've offered it out, I think. Is it working? Okay, I'm not sure that it is, so I'll read out the question. So Charlie says, from Grace and Krysten, there's a common theme that it wasn't at school that they heard about parasport. It was from trying sport outside of school or meeting a specific coach. What would have helped you at school to discover parasport earlier that could potentially be implemented at schools?
So when I was at primary school, I just kind of cracked on with what everyone else in my class was doing in PE lessons. Like whenever we played football, I'd be in goal. I was terrible at goal. I couldn't really move to stop the ball coming in. So the opposing team had a great time doing that. And so it wasn't made or drawn attention to the fact that there were some things I couldn't run on the playing field, but I could still feel included within that PE lesson space. And I have this memory of being around in year 4 or something, and everyone was doing, learning how to do teddy bear rolls and gymnastics and everything. And I just couldn't do it. And I was getting so frustrated. And I remember the teachers coming over and being like, right, I'm going to pick your legs up and do a handstand. And I felt so included because you could see that I was struggling. And he was like, yeah, you're going to nail this. But when I moved into secondary school, I'd already started para swimming. I already knew I wanted to go to a Paralympic Games. And I was, again, the only disabled person within that schooling environment. But my school were amazing. I remember them renting wheelchair basketball chairs for a week, and everyone could sign up at a lunchtime or after school and go and try an accessible sport to kind of understand that there are mainstream sports and there are para sports. And it was such an amazing experience. And I remember doing the Community Sports Leadership Award and the Higher Sports Leadership Award. And one of the components is you have to become an official. And we did level 1 officiating in boccia, And it was just amazing that of all the sports they could have chosen, they made it so accessible. And next door to my secondary school, there was a special needs school as well. So we were able to go in and run sessions with them and actually really feel integrated, a part of that disabled sport world. And I think sometimes it's not necessarily like just about, you know, how do we raise awareness of para sports, actually being involved in para sport in other ways rather than always being the athlete. It's also about how can you give back to sport in general? Because from a personal standpoint, I think being in sport is really, really selfish. It's always about how can you make your performance better? Like, and you start at the grassroots, but how often do you look back when you become an elite athlete and say, it's my time to give back? So I really think being in a school and having that nurturing environment of teachers being like, you have to give back. It's the whole point of sport. It's like community. It's not just about me, is really, really important. And the fact that they highlighted, you know, that everyone can try accessible sport and you can officiate in it or be a part of that world is really, really important. And I really wish more schools would take up that initiative as well.
That is so amazing. So the integration of disabled, able-bodied people, the sports, and having organizations come into schools and then showcase these various sports. Amazing. Yeah. We've also got another question. So from an anonymous attendee, but have you got any recommendations about education or training for coaches or volunteers looking to upskill or broaden their offer to disabled people? So essentially any way to upskill.
In Wales, I know through Disability Sport Wales, and I think in partnership with Toyota as well, they have a DIT training course, disability inclusion training, and that's sort of quite often targeted at sports coaches and people that want to get involved in upskilling their awareness. So I know that's something that's readily available through Disability Sport Wales within Wales, and they have different levels within that, DIT 1, DIT 2 sort of thing. So I know that exists sort of if you're in that neck of the woods.
I remember I tried to find out more through like personal training and how to understand that education. There wasn't actually that much education on it. I remember there's like a small little paragraph, and I don't know that many ways to upskill because I've really searched. So maybe that's something that we need to try and create more within the disabled community. That's something that's potentially lacking.
Definitely.
So I think we'll stop with the questions for now, but we will come back to the questions again. And they're amazing questions. So thank you so much to everybody sending those in. So moving on to overcoming barriers. So Krysten, if your disability causes pain, how do you navigate this when engaging in sport? And do you have advice for those people who have pain levels increase when they're exercising?
Yeah, so myself, obviously, with achondroplasia and playing badminton is a very physical sport. And yes, I have had a lot of pain, but I think it's about how I can sort of manage it myself and having that understanding about managing that. Obviously, I would love to be able to play sport every day and never be in pain, but we know that, and I know for sure that my disability will come with that. I think it's being able to sort of understand that and having the awareness of when you might need to stop or change something. Because I know from, you know, my program, and I know from a lot of our junior pathway things that our coaches now are taking a full understanding of what an athlete's going to need, because obviously there might be times when your disability will start to affect the session, but as the athlete, you still want to take part, and that's the most important bit about it, is that you are still in feeling included, aren't you? So I think it's just being able to manage the communication within the athlete and the coaches and what's best for them.
Yeah, amazing. And Mike, what do you think?
I think it's the sports that I'm involved in now, wheelchair sports, and previously as an athlete, track and field, and obviously a multi-sport athlete. I think pain and sport generally go hand in hand. But obviously, when you add that disability element, when you have an impairment, pain is a major part of it. I think it's just about managing, like load management. So if it's a game situation and training situation, then it's about load management in terms of knowing you can't expect someone to do a 2-hour session or whatever, that they come in and maybe they do their own warm up and they come in at certain parts of the session to do certain elements, and then they have their breaks and Maybe it's a week on, week off. Maybe it depends on how many times you're training in a week and all that sort of stuff. So, you know, we hear it more and more in elite sport now about load management, about making sure that you don't burn yourself out at the start of your career, that you're still functioning, you know, a couple of cycles later on, and you know, not doing yourself an injury even more. So yeah, I think it's just about having that understanding between the coach and the other participants, players, whatever, that needs to be that load management. They need to have those discussions.
Yeah, I also think understanding with yourself in a way, because I don't do, you know, a pro competitive sport, but I did a marathon for the first time this year, and I do a lot of running. And I've noticed with myself, generally on the trajectory, I can get used to the pain. Like the more I run, the less pain I get in, or my body adapts to it. But there will be some times where I am in a lot of pain and it's just come out of nowhere. And I think it's just understanding your body will go through ups and downs, and it's never just linear. And not beating yourself up about that. Because I can go like last year I couldn't walk for 3 months, and then this year I'm running a marathon, and my life is so different. So I think it's just understanding and not judging yourself for the difference in what you can and can't do. But Grace, I would love to hear your thoughts on what steps an organisation can take to remove physical attitudes and systemic barriers.
I think that's a massive question, to be honest. And I think the most important thing is just being open about the fact that if you have a disability, it's not the end of the world, you know, like it's okay if you are going to struggle learning new things. And also, you know, like I compete in swimming, you know, we're an integrated program for those that are divers, swimmers, para swimmers, and a lot of our social media stuff is having equal representation, showing the highlights of para swimmers compared to non-disabled swimmers, and also like really celebrating it on the same level. Like the experience of a para athlete shouldn't be less than an athlete, and it's not perfect all of the time. You know, for example, I'm at university and I competed at Bucks, which is like a competition for those who are at university, and they advertise it as the para swimming and swimming championships. And I found that the experience of the para swimmers was down here and the non-disabled swimmers were up here. So how can you call something an equal competition if the experience is different? So one of those things was that if you were a para swimmer, you would only be eligible to swim in a heat. Whereas if you're a non-disabled swimmer, you have the opportunity to qualify for a final. And they also have Bucks records for swimmers, but not for para swimmers. And I think sometimes national governing bodies or organizations that are running sporting events at an integrated level need to actually listen to the experience of the members who are competing within that environment. Because unless you have people that have a voice or feel empowered to be able to say, this is not right, then those people that sit at the top are never going to understand what the actual participation level is going to be like. And sometimes it's only through having those difficult conversations or shouting loud enough or getting people to support your cause that you're actually going to get fully integrated competition or even activity levels. You know, we've managed to see that for the first time ever, there are now para Bucks records that happened at short course championships a couple of weeks ago. But this competition was happening for years. And it's only when organizations actually feel that they're in a position to listen or actually have an ear to listen that we're actually going to see that things can change and things can be better. Like, I think it's really, really difficult sometimes to be in the right room or with the right people for the right conversations to enact positive change. But if people both ways, from the top and the bottom, are actually having discussions, then neither are going to know about possible future improvements that can actually make that sporting experience better for all who participate.
Yeah. Krysten, Mike, do you have anything to add to that?
I think you covered most things, really.
Yeah, no, I think
you know, it's pretty,
nailed it.
you can, yeah.
Yeah. I wonder, have you had any barriers that you face when you have been in para sport, for example, where you obviously, Grace and Krysten, you experienced para sport after you left school, and it's been pretty smooth sailing, but have you had like any physical barriers, for example, that it's like, oh, that could have been improved, and then you've gone on to help achieve that further?
I think for me, like the major one that really irritated me was Bucks. And I was like, right, this is my hill that I'm going to die on. You know, for example, like even officials not having the right language. So when we competed last year, I have a friend who is a hand amputee, and she was disqualified for not doing a two-handed touch on the wall, but she can't do a two-handed touch because she has one hand. And it was like, if you actually understood or had the conversation and looked at the exception codes, or even just used common sense, you wouldn't be making someone feel awful about the fact that they can't do something because they have a disability. And like, I think it can be really frustrating sometimes that the barriers that shouldn't be there are still there because people haven't used common sense. And I also think like other barriers sometimes are when you even go to a training session and you can't get to the training session because the pavements don't line up, because like there's a drop curb and you're a wheelchair user, but it's a really high pavement to get into, or when people are parking in disabled car parking spaces and you can't park in a normal space, so you can't actually get into the building to do the facility. And I don't think that's a sport issue. I think it's a society issue that people don't seem to understand that these are the barriers sometimes, the actual access into the environment that stop people from being able to access sport. And it really irritates me as well that people don't seem to understand that, yeah, if you are disabled and you need a little bit more help, that's okay, you know. And being disabled is the one group that anyone can fall into at any time. So if we're creating a space where we're making every single activity club or like physical outlet like accessible, then nobody's ever going to miss out. You know, where 15% of the global population has a disability, why isn't every single sport club or institution trying to make that possibility of being active with an impairment a possibility? Because at the end of the day, we'd all lead much better and healthier lives if we're able to actually access the sport or that physical activity space.
I definitely agree and think that the physical world makes disabled people feel more unable. And I actually read that like 70% of disabled people feel more comfortable in the metaverse than they do in the physical world, which is ridiculous. And I definitely think that needs to improve. And you're saying about facilities and potentially adaptive equipment. How do you think clubs or gyms could make that like a permanent offering rather than just something that they potentially do sometimes? What needs to change, Krysten?
Yeah, I think it's bringing in more rules and an education with it as well. I think, you know, but for someone like myself, that if I was to go down to a gym, you know, obviously myself as an athlete, I would feel comfortable, but someone with Dawson that maybe has to lift off weights from somewhere but doesn't even want to ask the gym instructor as well. It's sort of just making, you know, just basic things like that more accessible. Or, you know, I go to gyms where, you know, if you were to go there, they say it's wheelchair accessible, but you look at the sort of ramps that they'd have to get up onto bits and things, and it's not accessible, you know, and it's that sort of embarrassment of that I don't like it. I've had it loads of times when I was younger that I would never want to ask for help, really, because I don't. That's just how I am. And I think it's just, yeah, making that sort of everything more accessible.
Yeah, I also think just taking responsibility. My friend, she's a wheelchair user and she was in the gym and she needed the cable machines and she asked somebody, oh, how long will you be? And then he said, I got two more sets. And then he was using the bottom cable. And then when she went to use it, he moved it up to the top one so she couldn't reach it. And it's just, I don't understand why people behave in that way. But if that happens, I think it's having the responsibility as an individual or a club or organization to be like, that is not okay. And speaking on behalf of disabled people and changing attitudes by trying to educate people within the organization. Like everybody can do their part. And I think the more people that speak up, the higher impact that we will have. So, you know, when you're in the gym or you're anywhere really, the train station, the lifts aren't working, always be an advocate for disabled people and tell them that that's not okay. Because I think it's those conversations continually throughout time that will really help disabled people feel more included. Oh, felt passionate about that one. And I guess moving on to practical solutions for organizations, Mike, how can we get more funding?
Oh, that's another one of those. Everybody obviously needs money, you know, and being a disability sport, invariably it's 10 times more expensive to do things, whether it's the personal equipment or the club equipment or whatever. So, yeah, I mean, there's a couple of approaches. Obviously, you have to be very proactive as a club or an organization in terms of doing your own work, in terms of raising your own money and doing events and engaging people and things. And something we've always tried to do in terms of not necessarily looking for just people to sponsor us, but in terms of partners, partners as opposed to sponsors, that you can develop long-term relationships with. It may start with small bits, but over time, if you keep proving yourself and showing the product you've got is of value, that people will hopefully stick with you and you'll develop that partnership. But in terms of funding, it's really about, from my point of view, I feel it's really about making sure that you've got the project that fits the funding. There's lots of funding out there, but a lot of the time chase money because it's money, and they end up making their lives more difficult because they've opted for money. That means they have to then go down this route of doing this particular thing and reporting back on that type of thing, and you end up taking you a little bit away from your target. So the hard thing is really finding the right pot of money that has a project attached to it that is really going to help you develop what you're doing anyway, your core role. So that's easy to say, but not always easy to do. And that would be my advice: is don't necessarily just go chasing pots of money because they're out there. Really make sure that you've got a targeted approach to doing the right thing that will help you develop a project, which will help develop a certain group within your organization or a certain thing you're trying to achieve, that it will complement that as opposed to take you away from it.
You said about partnerships as well. How would you go about getting certain partnerships, or have you got any advice regarding that?
Well, it's the sort of thing of finding out what you do, and then again in your local area. This is I can only talk about what we do here. It's about finding businesses or organizations or whatever that feel they have a similar principle to yourself in terms of what you're trying to do or what they're trying to do. And it's about marrying up that relationship of them promoting you and you promoting them in a way that's not just them giving you money, but it's a way of them actually getting something from you that's tangible, is real. And also then obviously if the money comes the other way, then obviously that helps you develop what you're doing and gives you that free money in a way that you're not tied to spending it in a certain restricted path. That it allows you to do the softer, wider edges of what you're trying to achieve, as opposed to just, buying a piece of kit or doing a certain thing. So yeah, it's a lot of work, and it takes a lot of talking and a lot of identifying and developing relationships. But it's basically like a business approach, I suppose. You've got to think of what you're doing as, a real business-minded view of what have you got to offer, and bringing people in that will complement that.
Yeah, and coming back to the questions in the Q&A box, linking to that, someone's asked, do you have any recommendations, perhaps places to advertise, who to contact for spreading awareness of a club to potential members and bringing people on board? This is
I think the Everybody Moves is a great one to recommend, that because obviously the work that the ParalympicsGB do through Everybody Moves, there's lots of awareness and places to advertise and promote. I mean, from our point of view, the club I'm involved in, Rhyl Raptors, we through Everybody Moves, we've won a Club of the Month award, and we're now in the Club of the Year award sort of voting. So there's a lot of stuff going out there from us that's supported by Everybody Moves. So and I'm sure every home country, again, I can speak from a Welsh point of view, there's disability sports organisations, Disability Sport Wales, that will always back up and support what you're doing and help you advertise and expand your audience, if you like. So I'm sure the other home countries have got exactly the same type of thing.
Amazing. Thanks, Mike. And then Krysten, Samantha has asked, I would love to know your own personal experience with being faced with exclusion and how you bounce back from the experience.
I think we already answered this one.
No.
You didn't? Oh,
No.
we talked about exclusion.
Yeah.
Would you like to start off
We mentioned the topic, but I think she wants like a direct explanation on how you'd bounce back from that. Maybe if you've struggled, how do you deal with that mentally and overcome that again?
Oh, okay. Krysten, do you want to lead off?
Yeah, I'll go. Yes, I think for me, like I said earlier on, that I was a keen footballer and loved it, but was also very sporty at the time. And I think obviously that really hurt me that I wasn't able to go and play football with my mates when I got older, because obviously they went and played for teams, and I sort of hung around with them for a bit and was part of the team, but got 5 minutes here and there. And I think that just made me really think about what I was doing. Why am I carrying on here? Because clearly this isn't for me. And I think that's when I sort of said, no, you know what, I love sports so much that I'm going to go and find something else. And that's sort of when I did. I managed to find the table tennis and then eventually the badminton. But I think it was just sort of overcoming that sort of quite a hard thing of leaving my friends as well and not being able to go and play football with them on the weekends. Obviously, I was still able to sort of socialise and play football with them in the week, but it was sort of just going, do you know what? Actually, I'm going to make this opportunity better for me, and I'm going to hopefully become a Paralympic champion. And yeah, who knows where the future can go from that.
So just taking that bounce back, positive mental attitude of being like, okay, that's fine, it's not for me, but I will find what's right for me and try and do what I can rather than be shattered by it. Nice. And then we've got quite a few more questions coming in. So someone's asked, for elite level athletes, the environment is set up for them to achieve. There seems to be a disparity between how the pathways vary from region to region across the country. If you had an open remit, how would you remove the effective postcard lottery? Mike. Hard question.
How long have you got? I think in any sort of sport or life in general, there's the way the country's set up is, there's pockets of population, there's pockets of stuff going on, and in other areas not so much. Again, from a Welsh point of view, there's always been a disparity between sport. You expect everything in South Wales, and particularly around Cardiff, to be very much the focus from a Welsh point of view. And in the north, we've always tried to keep up with that and make sure that it's not the people in the north are sort of held back too much because of the lack of resources maybe that come up our way. So yeah, it's one of those where unless you have a complete clean the slate and everyone gets a fair share, but then that doesn't really fit because not every part of the country has got the same population needs and the same sort of groups of people and different things. So yeah, I think it takes someone a lot smarter than me to answer that in terms of how you would do that. But it's just one of those things where you just have to keep knowing your audience, I suppose, again, of knowing where you are in the country and what it is you've got that's good and what you can do and what's needed, and making sure that you keep campaigning and chipping away at making sure the resources come your way when you have a product that needs supporting, and try not to do the things that aren't going to work, as daft as that seems. Many people want to go down this route because they're passionate about a certain thing, but if it doesn't fit the area and it doesn't fit the group of people around you, then you're going to be struggling if you're competing against someone that's got all the right people in the right place at the right time. So yeah, I suppose it's a question of sort of pick your battles and but also keep fighting for what is right if you've got something that works and needs that support.
Thank you so much, Mike. There's actually another question here for you from Claire Guy. So she says, hi, I work in the spinal injuries unit in Cardiff in Wales. Personally, I love promoting accessible outdoor sport. As therapists, the first step is to encourage people to engage in the sport for well-being and exercise. And of these, there'll be people who progress to exploring parasport. Disability Sport Wales does cover South Wales, but Mike, are there any particular links we can have in South Wales? We have people who enjoy swimming through hydrotherapy, but then it's a big step to then swim into the pool.
Coming from North Wales, I wouldn't claim to have great knowledge of what is available in South Wales in terms of on the ground locally. But I do know, again, referencing Disability Sport Wales, I know they cover the area, but they have recently had a sort of a revamp of their what they're offering, and I know that there's a great sort of pathway team now that can help in terms of grassroots, identifying those that want to just do participation level and those that want to progress. And I know that there's very much a whole product there now that can be rolled out pretty much across the country. So yeah, maybe revisit the Disability Sport Wales, and I know the people there in terms of Morgan, Nathan, Gemma. They've got a great team there that sort of can help maybe answer that a little bit more specifically.
Amazing, thank you. And then from Daniel Godridge, he says, we always have our adaptive paddle equipment out on show at the lake as a provider and actively put out on social media when we do sessions. Word of mouth has been really good for us, but NGBs and active sports could be a bit more specific about what's out there to access paddleboarding and paddle sports. From taster sessions all the way to challenge and performance training. I totally agree, being welcoming, and one of the things we target as a provider is to hit a SEL safe, enjoyable learning environment. But Krysten, how do you think we can make it easier for people to see what's out there? I think we lightly touched on this earlier, but have you got any other new creative ways for people to, feel like they can be targeted?
It's the social media, but also just reach out and as much as you can to see events, etc. Almost these sessions. I think it's just like Mike says, you might only get one or two people through the door, but hey, Paris really good, at the time. So I think it's just making as much as it is fun and we can. So it's quite a hard one, I think, because people do a lot and they don't get much reward from it at times. Just keep doing it, because if you give up, well, you might get some people come through and they don't hear about it.
Amazing, thank you. Grace, have you got anything to add to that, or you feel like we've covered everything on that note?
I feel like Krysten summed it up really well there, to be honest.
Yeah. And like for the disabled people who have joined and are quite interested to do sports, Grace, if you answer this for me, how has participating in sport changed your life, and why should others take that leap?
I would definitely not be the person I am if it wasn't for sport. Sport gave me so much confidence, the ability to travel the world, to make friends, to feel like I had the ability to achieve anything I put my mind to, and also learning that it's okay to fail, because sometimes you have to accept that you're not going to be brilliant, you're not going to be first. And in sport as well, someone is going to win and someone is going to come last. That's just the way it is. But being able to accept what your best is and feel value in that is definitely the greatest gift that sport has given me. So for anyone that's out there with a disability or impairment that's looking at getting more active or to find a sporting club, just jump in and do it, because it is nerve-wracking trying a new sport and figuring out new things. Like I did one of the ParalympicsGB taster days the other week in sit skiing, and I was terrible, but I had just the best time, learning something new, falling over constantly and just laughing at myself and just finding another way to be active that wasn't about being competitive. It was about just having fun and enjoying a different sport, and there are so many different sporting activities out there. Like if the first couple don't fit or you don't enjoy them, ditch it and find another one. There's no limit on how many sports you can try, and sometimes you might find a sport that you align better with at a certain age than you did at another, and it's just really finding a really supportive environment that encourages you to have fun, because I love sport, and I think if people did sport on the daily or whatever their limit is, would have a much more enriched life.
I also think on that, with me, for example, it was like I became disabled, and the first thing I thought of was, oh my gosh, I could go to the Paralympics now. And so it was like, it kind of instantly took out the fun of the sport for me, because I just thought, oh, I've got to go to the Paralympics. But it is about just having fun, trying things, seeing what you can do and what you like, and just giving it a go. And the fact that you said about just going along, having fun, having no pressure because you're not competing, and being really bad at something is actually so fun, and no one cares. Like no one's judging. Everyone's here just for a good time. So I love that so much. And then Mike, this is the last question. So big question, but looking forward to a world that's more accessible and a lot of disabled people are within sport, what do you think that world would look like in your mind? Or anyone answer it if you thought.
Yeah, I think it's one of those that you almost have to answer that. You almost got to take away the fact that it's disability sport, because it's sport then, isn't it? If you've got a world that there aren't those barriers and those issues and those things that stop people, participate in or whatever, you take all that away and that's what the world looks like, then in many ways that's just sport. There's no disability sport then, is there? It's inclusive sport and everyone doing it.
Yeah.
And that's, that would be brilliant. And I know there's organizations out there that tirelessly beating this drum every day, trying to make mainstream sports clubs more inclusive and offering them pathways along that, you know, coach education, just changing attitudes, making sure local facilities, leisure centres of, you know, being active about parking spaces out front and all that. You know, it's all the little things. But I suppose in a world where all that's not a problem, you know, then that's basically, then it just becomes about the sport and about people, or not even sport, activity. You know, it's about people making a choice to say, right, today I want to go and do whatever, and then just do it. You know, when I was growing up, everything I did sport wise, I had to do away. I had to go away. I had to go to Stoke Mandeville. I had to go to wherever, go to South Wales or whatever. And that was one of the reasons why we had this plan to develop local sports clubs in North Wales that were all about wheelchair sport, because every person, whether you acquire an impairment like me, you were born with a disability, or you're a youngster that's come, you know, wants to try sport, you should have something on your doorstep that means you can just turn up and do it. And I suppose that's what we're all trying to work towards and achieve, really.
Yeah, hit the nail on the head. Thank you so much for that. And thank you so much to everybody for sending in loads of questions. I hope that we've been able to give you as much knowledge and insight as possible. I've actually got a list of other home nation disability sport councils across the whole of the UK. So to those listening, if you want to get a pen and a paper, and I'm going to list them out for you so you can go do some research. So for England, we've got Activity Alliance. Northern Ireland, we've got Disability Sport Northern Ireland. For Scotland, it's Scottish Disability Sport, and then Wales, Disability Sport Wales. And there's loads of other useful links on the Everybody Moves website. So I hope that's super helpful. But yeah, thank you so much for listening today. And I hope that you can go and action these steps and build a more inclusive society for disabled people. So thank you so much. And thanks to you three as well for such amazing advice.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care, everyone. Have a lovely day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.